Humans are weird old jingles. The harsh light of 3 suns was filtering through the roof of the basking dome and giving the earth plants that grew from the hydroponic tubes a warm green glow. All things considered, the dome was the most comfortable place to be in the searing afternoon, at least when your options were the stagnant pools and barely moving streams of the base. Tumbleswright was cuddling comfortably with the newest addition to the base, a rather phlegmatic nurse fresh from the Central Xenobiology University. Given that they had been silent for nearly an hour, Tumbleswright shifted and decided some light conversation was in order. "Have you heard human friend O'Connor today?" Tumbleswright asked. "He is the human who glows the brightest, correct?" Shifts indifferently asked. "Yes," Tumbleswright confirmed. "His outer membrane is optimized for solar collection. That is why he has to be so careful about going out of the base shielding." "What happens if he goes out without his protective gear?" Shifts indifferently asked. "I note that none of the other humans are quite so strict about layering on the oils and material shielding." "That is a good sounding," Tumbleswright said. "They have informed me that the rest of the humans on base have a biochemical gradient in their outer membrane that offers some protection, but reduces their ability to produce certain chemicals necessary for their immune response. Without such a great concentration of this chemical, human friend O'Connor suffers from increased damage from the ultraviolet light spectrum." Tumbleswright reached up a gripping appendage and patted the uppermost portion of Shifts Indifferently's core in a preemptive gesture of comfort. "Several weeks ago, he felt the need to rush out of the base without his shielding to prevent one of the smaller repulsor transports from drifting away in a particularly heavy wind we had," Tumbleswright explained. "Once he was out, he realized that all of them were being moved, and so he felt obligated to secure them to the ground with sturdy cables." "Why did he not simply deactivate the gravitational function?" Shifts indifferently asked. "Oh, he had by that point," Tumbleswright said with a dismissive wave. "Apparently the wing form of the transports meant the wind gusts were capable of moving them without assistance." Shifts indifferently gave a hum of respectful appreciation at the natural forces. "With one thing and another, human friend O'Connor was out in the solar radiation for nearly a quarter of an hour," Tumbleswright went on. When he came back in his exposed skin, and even that covered by his duty clothing, was glowing with a fantastical and rather ominous light. "Was his fear causing the change?" Shifts indifferently asked. "Oh no," Tumbleswright said. "In the rush of the duties to perform, he had actually forgotten about his danger entirely. He was quite pleased with the results when he came in." "What was causing the ominous glow then?" Shifts indifferently asked. "The uppermost layer of his external membrane had taken terminal damage," Tumbleswright said, making sure to give his companion a soothing stroke with the information. "The glow came from a large percentage of his cells. You know those strange little bodies most of the other species seem to be made of, simply self-destructed to prevent tumorous growth." "He lost a large portion of his outer membrane?" Shifts indifferently demanded, stiffening his appendages in horror. "It was gradual," Tumbleswright assured him, slipping several appendages of his own into Shifts Indifferently's in a comforting grasp. "Their bodies have mechanisms to limit the danger of this very thing. However, he was in such pain that he could not stand to be touched for days afterwards." Shifts Indifferently gave a prolonged shudder and snuggled closer to Tumbleswright. "He was well enough to jest about the situation," Tumbleswright said. "He called the process lobstering up for dinner." "What is that reference to?" Shifts indifferently asked. "Apparently," Tumbleswright said, "humans have a tradition where they boil certain crustacean species alive to prepare them for consumption." It occurred to Tumbleswright that that little human tradition might not have been a comforting bit of information to add to the situation as Shifts indifferently stiffened. "Has he been so injured recently?" Shifts indifferently asked. "Oh no," Tumbleswright assured him. "That is not at all why I brought him up. Indeed, he is feeling very well. That is what led to his singing." "Singing?" Shifts indifferently said, relaxing and raising an appendage in interest. "I have not yet had the pleasure of hearing a human sing in person." Was quite odd, but it was singing," Tumbleswright went on. "He only appears to do it unconsciously and stops when he notes he is observed." "Does he wish to conceal the singing?" Shifts indifferently asked, with a set of disappointment down his core. "I asked him, and he assured me he did not," Tumbleswright said. "He simply only feels the pulse of the song when he is distracted and moving. You will probably have a chance to observe it randomly. If you do not, I noted that he almost always starts singing when he passes the communal rest perch for the winged at the end of their shift. He says something about the way they hold their wings inspires a particular song. But how can he feel the pulse if they can observe him? Shifts indifferently asked in confusion. Humans are very contradictory creatures, Tumbleswright said. They chatted for a bit longer before swimming out to their duties. As fortune would have it, they met again just as the shifts were changing and the winged were settling into their perches for the early afternoon communal. It was quite pleasant in itself to watch the mutual grooming ritual. Although the hundreds of swift and minute movements were far too much for an ungulate to follow in detail, the sense of camaraderie and peace translated quite well from the flight of winged to the pair of ungulates watching from below. In them the flight settled down and hung from their perches, wings enclosing their bodies. Some time passed, but soon enough the odd double thumping of the human's locomotion filled the room. Human friend O'Connor entered the building, his massive carrying container slung over one shoulder. He wasn't singing when he crossed the corridor, but as he turned the corner and passed the rest tree, he began humming. And before he passed through the other door, he had broken into soft song. Hot cross buns, 1 a penny, 2 a penny, hot cross buns. The soft music followed the human down the corridor as they watched him go. Beautiful, Shifts indifferently observed once the sound died away. What is the history of that song? Oh, it's quite ancient, Tumbleswright assured him. Centuries, if not millennia old. I am told it was an advertisement for one of their baked foodstuffs at its conception, but it has long since lost that meaning. Curious, Shifts indifferently noted. What about a tree full of winged could remind him of baked goods? Humans are weird just a little shy. Have you heard the news, eighth sister? Fourth cousin demanded as she came skittering around the abrupt 90-degree corner of the base. Eighth sister flared her frill in warning a moment too late as fourth cousin smacked her joint against the wooden beams with a sickening cracking sound. Fourth cousin's long, luxurious frill clamped down around her neck and shoulders, the pretty turquoise colors of joyful excitement on her membrane fading to dull gray as the pain reached her primary processing nodes. Eighth sister did bother scolding her hive mate for her carelessness. The cousin was barely old enough to have molted her legs more than once. It wasn't the place of an eighth sister to question the wisdom of 3 mothers and 2 grandmothers, but for the life of her, she couldn't see why they had sent this pretty little bud out for her required civil service at all, let alone so early in her life. With dozens of elder sisters and cousins, and even more than one brother, out doing their duty for the community at large, a cousin who might have been a second sister in her own right was really better suited to playing with the petals in her father's garden than braving the dangers of the galaxy at large. It does hurt, fourth cousin managed to click out in mother as eighth sister examined the damaged joint. It does, my green one, eighth sister clicked softly back. Just stay still. I think I can walk to the medical ward, fourth cousin said as she tried to stand from where she had slid down against the wall. Do not bother, eighth sister said, letting her antenna curl in amusement. You would not want to make the humans feel useless, would you? I've already radioed for one. Why would my walking to the medical ward make a human feel useless? Fourth cousin asked. Her pain-tight antenna relaxed a bit at the curious statement, and eighth sister took that as a good sign. It helped distract them both from the fact that interstitial fluid was leaking out of her damaged joint. What is the point of having the base crawling with giant mammals who love nothing better than carrying people around if you don't let them carry you around when it is useful? Eighth sister asked, quirking her mandibles in wry amusement. Do they really enjoy lifting and carrying people all that much? Fourth cousin asked, even as her proboscis lolled out of her mandibles. They don't string their young, you know, eighth sister said. They don't? Fourth cousin demanded, the shock of that statement actually putting some color back into her frill. No, eighth sister assured her. They carry them. Fourth cousin's charmingly wide-set eyes sparkled with fascination, and eighth sister couldn't help smiling. The home gossip was true enough. Fourth cousin could easily lure in some second or third brother from even the best of hives with those eyes. Her pleasant musings and unease were both cut short by the sound of pounding footfalls as the requested human came rushing around the corner, pulling his massive form up just short of them and quickly darting his bright, tiny binocular eyes over them. What do you need? He asked of neither or both of them. I seem to require a trip to the medical ward, fourth cousin said, gesturing at her damaged joint. Would you carry me? I think I can walk, but my sister is very overprotective of us younger cousins, as you can see. The human gave a laugh and exposed the blunt serrations of his mandible to them. Sisters can be like that, he said with a nod, as he bent down and, following eighth sister's instructions, formed a couch with his arms and tenderly lifted fourth cousin. Do you have sisters? Fourth cousin asked as they started to move down the corridor. 3, the human said. I'm the oldest. Fourth cousin clicked in approbation at the robust little hive. But how do you know what older sisters do? She asked. I've got 5 older cousins, he explained. In your father's garden? Fourth cousin asked. The human glanced curiously at eighth sister for explanation. Did you share the same living conditions or live separately? She explained, as fourth cousin's frill pulsed alternately between apology, gratitude, and flashes of pain. Oh, the human said with a nod. Separately. They were the next province over. We'd visit a couple times a year. The human kept fourth cousin distracted with friendly chat, but was distracted when they had to navigate a series of raised support struts that extended above the floor of the base. Eighth sister saw the pain dominating again in her cousin's frill and took up the conversation line that had been dropped in the corridor. What was the news you wanted to tell me? Eighth sister asked. The question effectively distracted fourth cousin as her frill flushed with ensnarement. But she spoke with a commendably motherly courage in the common language the human understood. That the new human has brought a musical instrument with him and is said to be quite skilled in playing, fourth cousin said quietly. The human holding her glanced down with a pleased smile, and eighth sister easily concluded that this was the new human of which she spoke. Do you like music? He asked. I do, fourth cousin admitted, and I have heard that this acoustic guitar music is very safe. Safe as can be, the human agreed. Would you like me to drop by and play you a little something earth while your leg's in the mender pod? This injury hardly requires a mender pod, fourth cousin said, but I would welcome some music. It's a date then, the human said. I'll check my off hours with your sleep schedule and see what's what. They arrived at the medical ward and were quickly ushered in by a third sister who seemed positively delighted to have a non-human injury for once. The human gently set fourth cousin on the bed and strode off with a promise to return with his instrument in due time. Eighth sister noted that fourth cousin watched him go with focused curiosity. What focuses you, fourth cousin? Eighth sister asked. When I approached you in the corridor, fourth cousin stated, I was planning on asking your aid in convincing that first brother to share his music. I had been told that he was quite shy and very hesitant to share his skill. Perhaps your source of information was inaccurate, eighth sister suggested. I do not think so, fourth cousin said. If I might suggest, the third sister medic offered. Eighth sister and fourth cousin twitched their antennae respectfully at her. Humans have distinctly different rules for injured cadre mates than healthy cadre mates, the third sister said. Since you are injured, the human is all but socially required to offer you the entertainment of his music. Curious, eighth sister said. Convenient but curious. Humans are weird heads up. No matter how well a space station was engendered, no matter how far technology advanced, at least so far as it had advanced so far, an inhabited space station was never quiet. The atmosphere had to be purified. Plants rustled and filters hummed with air movement. The air had to be circulated. There was no such thing as a perfectly efficient fan. The very materials of the hull and superstructure would flex and bend minutely, as the differences in temperature caused even the most stable of molecular bonds to expand and contract. Even when the frames were vented and ghosted along without air, any species that had a concept of sound could hear the movement whenever their bodies, or rather spacesuits, made contact with the material of the station. Most psychologists noted that this was probably for the best. They had as yet found any species that thrived in a truly silent environment. Even so-called deaf species were used to the stimulation of some sort, carried on the gas or water they breathed. Even the space whales that the humans loved to observe could feel the pinging of the thinly spread atoms when they wandered out of the nebula and into the void. However, if they lingered there too long, they developed various neuroses that were nearly indicative of sapience. They were so close to some of the common failings of more advanced brains. The various schools of psychology would occasionally note this, and for a few cycles the various universities would be a-twitter with fears of humans going mad from lack of audio stimulation and flights of winged dispersing into the sound void. They would suggest solutions and experiments, and it would usually all peter out as the various engineering departments would each in turn gently but firmly reminded the psychology departments that they were as far from developing a perfectly silent space station as their psych friends were from actually understanding human nature. All of this was idly passing through the mind of Quilksich as he pattered along with his companion. The particular space station that had brought all of this to the base of his mental pounce, as it were, was a shiny new thing that the humans had built to their own specifications and tolerances, and funded entirely from their own planet's economy. The situation was hardly unexpected. With a mass 3 times that of the second-largest species in the Alliance, the humans who chose to interact with the other species had needed to make accommodations that were often painful, if not outright medically inadvisable. Now, Quilksich wondered if the Trisk bases the humans had visited felt as strange and imposing to them as this one did to him. He somehow doubted it. The mere sense of massive spaces all around him was intimidating in a way that no confinement could be. He caught the sound of his own appendages striking the spider walk echoing back at him from the distant walls and gave a shiver. His companion shivered in agreement and twitched his legs in the direction of the common room. "Shall we find some companionship fit to fill this void?" his companion suggested in forcibly cheerful clicks. Quilksich tapped his paws in agreement, and they accelerated a bit in the direction of the outer hull. It was an odd design, but the human insisted that all living quarters be on the exterior section of their great round structures. Their engineers said it was something about redundancy and being able to keep their calciferous inner skeletons functional with rotational momentum if the artificial gravitational generators ever went out. Given how simple and nearly indestructible even human anti-grav systems were, that was an odd reason to forego the protection of being in the center of a craft offered, but the humans insisted. Quilksich angled himself upward to glance at the indicator light and clicked in dissatisfaction to note that it was a deep amber. The humans in the common room were doing something dangerous enough to prevent the immediate entry of the smaller Trisk. That something was also producing a repeated pounding sound that was vibrating the deck plating beneath his paws. It was intimidating to be sure, but it was also the very welcome sound of live beings doing something. He and his companion passed into the safety lock and peered through the plasteel barrier at what the humans were doing. "Basketball," his companion noted gleefully, raising his volume to be heard over the resounding noise made each time the ball struck the floor or the wall. "I have never had a chance to see it performed before." Quilksich clicked in agreement and crouched back on his rear motile appendages to watch the exchange. It was a very simple game in principle. He could think of pawfuls of example of similar games he had played in his youth, all of them several times more complex. The goal seemed to be to get a ball about the size of the human's head into a vector meet that was only 2 body lengths above the ground and in perfect parallel with it. A hatching game at best, if it were not for the fact that the game seemed to require another human or set of humans to actively provide challenging interference. 2 humans were currently dodging about the flat surface, which currently displayed comically oversized guidelines. "Do you really think those vector and limiter lines are really necessary?" his companion asked. "Are they that vector blind?" "Remember," Quilksich said, "they only have 2 eyes. Their vision is binocular and severely limited, and their hairs are almost useless for practical directionality. And of course the mass of the ball itself is a factor," his companion continued. "Still in proportion." His companion's voice stilled as the duo of humans began a slightly more intricate set of maneuvers that saw possession of the massive ball change several times without the humans once even brushing each other. "Yes," Quilksich continued the dropped thought. "In proportion to their mass and size, it is a very simplistic game. Note, however, that they do not touch sensory hairs, so that increases the challenge for them." His companion clicked in understanding as one of the humans suddenly broke away and bolted for the target vector meet. He tossed the ball and it failed, rebounding from the edge of the vector meet. The second human was right behind him and snatched the ball before tossing it up towards the vector meet. "The human under the vector meet needs to move!" Quilksich suddenly clicked in horror. "What is he doing? Human face structure is not sturdy enough to take such a blow!" his companion called out as they both darted for the emergency override on the door. They could only watch in horror, however, as the massive ball arched up and dipped perfectly down through the vector meat, just as the human below lifted up his binocular eyes to watch its trajectory. The human's slow reflexes meant that the ball slammed into his protruding nasal sensor just as it was fully extended. The blow first turned the human's head to the side and then twisted the entire bipedal form to the floor. Quilkich burst through the door, clicking in distress with his companion close on his paws. However, they stopped short as the sound the humans were making struck them. Both of the humans were laughing heartily as the uninjured human helped the injured one to his feet. "Do you require medical assistance?" Quilkich asked. However, it appeared that neither of the humans had noted their approach. To Quilkich's dawning horror, the injured human was beginning to leak bright red blood out of his nasal cavity. But instead of calling for the base medic, he only reached up to compress the exterior of the cavity in a membrane-crushing grip. "Yo!" the uninjured human called. "Why are the indicator lights red?" The injured human gave one of those deep grunts that could only come from mammalian lungs and swept his vision around the room before alighting on the two Trisk. "Lil Buzz!" the injured human slurs out as his smile caused a fresh line of red blood to streak down his lips. "Wazoo?" "He said, 'What's up, little buds?'" the uninjured human said cheerfully as he strode over and held out his hands for them to jump up. "This is a dangerous game for you, so I gotta get you back to the observation lock." "This is a dangerous game for you," Quilkich insisted, so overwhelmed by the sight of the compressed membrane and the flowing internal fluids that he forgot his manners. "We need to get the injured human to the medical ward." "For a stupidity-induced nosebleed?" the uninjured human scoffed. "We have gravity here. It'll stop in a bit and we can limit the spread of biohazard fluids by staying here." The injured human nodded in agreement, causing the blood to smear further over his hands. Quilkich stared at them both in horror, and it apparently showed in his stance and the humans preformed that odd form of communication that only binocular species could. "You're puffed out like a kitten in a room full of rocking chairs, little guy," the uninjured human finally observed. "Aku hapayo edi?" The injured human tried to speak. "Would it calm you down if I took my friend here to the medical ward?" the uninjured human translated. Yes, it would," Quilkich said firmly. The uninjured human lifted them up to the spider walk, and the injured human waved at them as the pair left the room. He used the hand he had been compressing his external sinus with, however, and this resulted in a fresh flow of blood from his nose that spattered on the floor, triggering the biohazard alarms, and gave them a good view of the internal fluids spread all over his hand. Quilkich shuddered as the AI began to insist that they leave the contaminated common room until the automated cleaning systems had sanitized it.